Good morning, students. It's a beautiful day to learn about writing rhetorical analysis. Today you're going to need your materials from Google Classroom, and we're going to have a lesson on stylistically advanced writing, since everybody at this point has mastered a strong thesis and evidence and commentary that is compelling. So we're going to call this fancy level rhetorical analysis. For this example, I wanted to show you what it would look like to plan if you read on the screen of your computer, but plan using notebook, paper, and pen. So what I'm doing here is while I'm reading, I'm taking notes and I'm writing things down, but I'm going to be careful not to take too much time to write things down because I know that that would be adding on extra seconds when every minute counts. So I'm going to start by pulling this argument from the thesis about the separation between people and nature. I'm going to write down the author's name so I make sure that I have that ready to go. And I'm writing down this instruction to analyze rhetorical strategies and underlining that S, only because I had a few people who forgot to go for multiple strategies. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that you need to get to 2 strategies in order to get full credit for evidence and commentary. If you have one really well-developed strategy, this could get you to a 3 out of 4 on evidence and commentary. And then assuming that you had a strong thesis, that could be a 4 out of 6 or a 5 out of 6 if you've also got style. So it's not the end of the world, but it's a good idea to have 2 strategies in there. If you can get 3 strategies, the advantage to that would be that it puts you in a position where if you mess up with one of the strategies or have a misread with one of the strategies, you're not going to lose points because you've still met that instruction from the prompt of doing 2 strategies well developed. But the downside might be that if timing is an issue, trying to get to 3 could put you in a position where you don't finish your thoughts. So make a decision there about what's best for you. For the planning stage, I'm going to make sure that I have out my computer with the passage, of course, pens that I love because that helps me, my notes from reading, and then I'm going to pull quotes again with line numbers to save time and try to avoid copying the entire quote. Do that only for the essay. So now we're going to plan. So I'm going to write my thesis statement using that piece from the thesis about the separation between nature and people, and then I'm also going to add a more nuanced argument about what the author is suggesting overall. I'm going to make a list of rhetorical strategies based on what I found when I took my notes while I was reading, and then I'm going to go back over my notes with the knowledge that these are so many great strategies, but I probably only want 2 or 3 of them to make sure that I have time. Here's where my advice might be different depending on what you're doing right now with in-class essays. If you just walked away from this essay with a 6 out of 6, you can think about using an organization like this one by topic or idea that lends itself really nicely to adding more strategies, and then if you have time, put more strategies in there. Just make sure that you keep time in mind. So if you're a person that's really struggling with strategies, try to get 2 and make sure there are 2 strategies you really understand well. Something simple like diction and repetition or diction and detail. But if you are a more advanced writer, here's where you can get fancy. So I'm also going to look for how I'm going to sort this into paragraphs. And what I've decided I want to do here is have one paragraph about the author's juxtaposition of his childhood versus modern childhood. And in that paragraph, I'm also going to probably get to diction and maybe some other things. And then I want to have another paragraph where he talks about a sense of what is lost in the modern childhood. So again, I'm going to kind of do a organization by ideas here, only because I see a lot of people sticking to strategies, so I want to give you some examples of how you might write that a little bit differently. So for that second paragraph, I think I'd like to use rhetorical questions, imagery, and I'm going to categorize that all under examples, and I know no matter what, I've got that anecdote that I can pull out and use here. All right, so let's go ahead and write this thing, and remember, we're going to try to get fancy here with our style. We sure are getting fancy there with 4 whole pages. So let's talk about what we did on this first page. Notice that I start by situating the thesis in the broader context, but that I only give that one sentence. With 2 sentences, I can get to that style point pretty easily as long as I do something else stylistically advanced somewhere later in this essay. See? Fancy! In my thesis, I'm also going to add a little bit more in there while I'm writing because I thought of it, and I'm going to make sure that it's clear what my strategies are, as well as what the different arguments that I'm going to use for the different paragraphs will be. Then when I get to the subthesis statement of the first body paragraph, I'm going to make sure my strategy is in there, and I'm going to build on that strategy with some additional strategies, which is a fancy move because remember, so many of you are fancy now. So let's talk about what we do on the second page here. Notice that to argue about diction and juxtaposition here, since I'm juxtaposing positive and negative, I want to really dig into those words describing diction and make sure that I both pull quotes that are positive and negative and then do analysis of those quotes that talk about positive and negative. And here I actually have a moment that I could have improved on. I really needed to develop this analysis about the useful boredom and the children's dreams of the future. So I put a little note here of how I might improve that. Remember though that this is graded as a draft, and a lot of you had moments like this where you could have developed your analysis, but then you came back and did better in another part of that paragraph and in another part of the paper. So it's nothing really to worry about because you're not going to lose points as long as you do other things well that are redeeming. So note that we use some lovely style here. We have some diction that's impressive. We have this kind of poetic, the author argues that a world in which children hope and dream is better than one in which advertisers plot and municipalities scheme. We almost have some rhyme going on there. And then we talk about inherent beauty versus harsh demands. So we're really doing work to use these strategies ourselves as well as analyze how the author does it. And then we start to get into the second body paragraph, which is going to be about exemplification, and that's where we're going to pull in that anecdote and the rhetorical questions. So notice that that subthesis again has the strategy and the argument. And now let's look at page 3. Here's another fancy move. If we develop analysis that suggests meaning and that talks about things that are implied by the author, that's fancy. Notice that we also integrate the rhetorical question smoothly and that we analyze both the quote and some paraphrasing that we put in there. And that at the end here, we do get a little repetitive. And again, that's something that in an out-of-class essay, I'd want to edit out of this. I say thoughtless and without thought in the same sentence. Yikes. But this is a draft. So again, if you did something like this, that would be okay. You probably, again, aren't going to lose points if you do other things to redeem yourself later. In this last paragraph, I'm going to teach you how to do something that is a little bit risky but could pay off. So we're going to try pushing back and challenging the author. Now you want to be careful with taking risks like this. Only do them when they're appropriate and when you feel like you've got a really good handle on what the author is saying. So what I'm doing here is going back to the context that I used to situate my argument from the introduction because I want that style point, and I'm pointing out that the author might be a little bit hypocritical himself because he's saying that his childhood had so much more exposure to nature, but he's citing as an example watching that nature through the windows of a car. So he's still separated from nature by glass and metal, quite literally. So I want to push back there a little bit. I might take this a bit too far. My tone gets sharp with this repetition of certainly, though I do go back to the argument, and I think that saves it. I go back to his negative and positive words, this juxtaposition, this idea that we're missing experiences, and then I pull it back and wrap it up with a suggestion about the answers. So this is fancy. Fancy move here. Challenge the author. Now, take a look at your own essay and rubric and set up a writing conference with me if you need to. I look forward to seeing you all at office hours.